Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. I'm Tom Dutta, your host. And hey, we have an exciting show today, and a fellow Quiet Warrior is returning after, I think, a couple years with something really exciting and new. Before we get going, I want to let you know we're live streaming today. What is live streaming? It's the next generation of broadcasting. We're actually live across Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter. And if you're on one of those feeds, you can actually watch us taping. You're peeking in the studio, taping a live podcast that will be released across all major podcast channels internationally. We'll also have a YouTube video version of it. So really excited to do this. You can also click on the subscribe button. We want you to subscribe to the Tom Dutta YouTube channel. That helps us do more of these shows. We also want you to find the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and give it a subscribe. And when the guest interview comes out, hey, give it a rating. That's how we spread the love. So it's my pleasure to introduce back to the show Dr. Sherrie Campbell. Dr. Sherrie, welcome.
Thank you, Tom. It's so nice to be back, and I appreciate your interest in having me back, and excited to do the show.
All right. Well, I just want to say, Sherrie, that you have a great background and bio, and usually I'll start by introducing the guest, but people have seen you before. They can find the last episode we did. Sherrie got into her backstory and her journey on that one. So we'll have that in the show notes as well. But I want to kick this off in a different way, Sherrie. I have a surprise for you because we're going to be talking about a new book that you've written, which is very special. So are you ready for the surprise?
I'm so ready. Thank you.
Okay. Everybody, I've read the book, Adult Survivors of Toxic Family Members. There's a tagline to that. And I've written a 5-star review. It will be posted on the book itself on Amazon. So I'm going to bring it on the screen now, Sherrie, just for a moment, just to get you excited. There it is.
There it is. I love it.
And everybody, I took a bit of a chance, didn't ask Sherrie's permission, but I put the leather jacket on the screen there. I think we fit. It almost looks like
we do fit.
I title this review, No Self-Help Book Has Enabled Me to create curiosity. And then I said, until I read this book, no self-help book enabled me to cut ties with my toxic family, heal and deal with the aftermath. Author Sherrie's blueprint, step by step, it rid the lifetime pain in my soul in weeks. This book helped me continue, brought me back to my estranged father to receive forgiveness before he died, discovered the shocking truth I never knew. I can only describe what occurred as a supernatural event, and I was an emotionally broken child and a self-worth chaser, and I'm now a perfectly broken adult, emotionally mature, and I'm enough. So thanks to Dr. Sherrie for giving the gift of that book. And hey, let's just celebrate. There's a little bit of fireworks for you.
I love it, Tom. That's so cute. I love it. You're
All right.
so sweet.
So listen, I'm just going to, this is storytelling. So first of all, I want to just turn it to you. Tell us a bit about what you do today, and then what inspired you to write this book and why.
So I'm a psychologist by trade. I've got my PhD, and I've been working for a very long time clinically. I have a huge practice, and I have a very large social media following, and just started my own podcast, and that is called Sherrie Sessions, Cutting Toxic Family Ties. And I'm the only expert out there that will do the offer of cutting ties. And I became this person only because every time I went to try to read the literature to find help, or went to a therapist to find help, the field of mental health fell very short of helping people like me. And so I truly believe that to get the sort of the X factor that someone like me would need, I'd need another survivor, not really another expert. So I am the expert, but I'm also a survivor, and the survivor in me is what is healing other people and giving them permission to cut ties, because their family may be everything for some, but it is not everything for all. And people can abuse, and families are made up of people. So unfortunately, families can be abusive.
Yeah, well, you're talking to somebody who's going like, "Yep, I get it." And you certainly know my story. I want to tell the
Hmm.
audience how we met. We met in I think 2017 or around there in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm in Vancouver, Canada. And I remember meeting you, and I remember just about the work that you had done, the book you were about to bring out, and this thing you said about families have toxic people. I was drawn to you
Hmm.
back then, and you're really kind. But it was really when I learned about what you're doing, I said, I think I need that in my life. Let's go back to something you said, Sherry, about people like me. Just a synopsis. What obviously you came as a survivor, but what was your story?
So I have two very toxic parents. And most people have one. Like I just did a show on my podcast on the passive toxic father, because I just finished a whole series on the toxic mother, and the passive toxic father is toxic to the is passive to the mother, right? So I just had two very toxic parents, and that affected me, and it affected my sibling. And there was a divide and conquer way of being in that family. uh, I think my father married 5 times. My mother married multiple times as well. So it's just a whole lot of trauma, emotional neglect. But there is also a lot of emotional abuse, which is not easy to define. And I stayed in this poisonous dynamic for 45 years because it was my belief that if I was truly abused, it'd be easy to explain.
Yeah,
And emotional abuse is so gaslit that it's not easy to explain. But I just knew that I hated the person I became around my parents, because they would make me feel like it was me. And
yeah,
so I believed it because I was their child. And we suffer in cognitive dissonance, which is we have two competing thoughts. One thought being my parents have to love me because they wanted to have me. And then the idea of maybe I have actually been being abused my entire life. And those two competing thoughts create a lot of trauma inside, and it's hard to work through that. And I've never found an expert in front of me with footprints in the snow to follow. So now I'm writing the books and giving footprints for other people.
well, I call you in
So
my mind, and I'll say publicly a trailblazer. And
yeah.
but everybody, I'm gonna endorse. I've read a lot of books, as you know. I've done a lot of reviews as a published author. There's not a lot of books on my list where I can honestly say that I adopted in my life what you taught, and it changed my life. And everybody, the first book Sherry wrote, you can tell us about that too, and the new one. These books changed my life. So may I just get into that a little bit, Sherry?
Yes, please. I would love to have you say something.
I can be one of your testimonials, the one of your broken people who actually came look. But I, throughout my life as a child, I grew up in a toxic family. That word, I never really liked it because I didn't
Hmm.
understand. It was like a stigma. But my father was a commanding officer in the military, and in British military, and then again in the Canadian forces. And he was a chronic alcoholic. And before he died, I reconnected with him, and it was because of your book that I actually was able to do that. He and I learned about his childhood story, and I know they say hurt people hurt people. Well, my dad actually had an alcoholic father, and he had probably mental illness, and he was doing the best with what he had, but his hurt on me was pretty serious. But I went through life, and it was exactly what you wrote about in the other book about. I was being told even by my mom, but he's your father, but he's your father,
Oh
and
yeah.
then recently I had a head injury, and I ended up finding my faith again in God. And this is not a religious show, but I started watching a show on TV with Anna. I'd wear a cross because I just lost the ability to really understand if I could get through this chapter. And I started picking that up in some of these people who preach that, you get forgiveness, but it's your father, and it's your mother. And I never realized that you can actually, there's such a thing as cutting ties. You can do that, and you can live the aftermath. So let's get into the book and talk about a little bit about this for people hearing at the same time. Some people are going
Hmm.
to say this is taboo. There's cutting ties. What does that mean? Just
Hmm.
talk about that, and we'll come back to the rest of my story.
Yeah, I think that there's this very strongly held cultural doctrine that family is everything.
Yeah.
And then but yet if a lover or a partner abuses you, you're allowed to cut ties. But if it's family, somehow you're not. And that just doesn't make any logical sense, religiously or otherwise. I don't think any God however you believe in God would choose to have you abused. So I got a note from somebody. I pulled it up here on my phone, but I don't know her, but I get these notes every day. This woman
Yeah.
said, "You just saved my life. I can't put it into words, but you've stopped me from hurting myself in my most desperate hour. Going
Wow.
to listen to your audiobooks now." And I was
Whew.
just, and I get these quite often because when it's family, unlike a love partner or a friendship, we do feel like we can't leave. And we cannot heal in an environment that's poisoning us, and we cannot get better. And this is why people get as sad and desperate as she gets, because the only way you feel like you can get out is if you kill yourself.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh my
so
gosh.
it's
I
insane.
I mean, thank you for sharing that. That makes the show even more real. Having a text message come in and you sharing that. I'm not sure if I told you this, but one of the things I did when I was in deep depression from my concussion, and I was really ruminating for a year at home trying to figure this out, is I got approved for what's called Kids Help Text Line, and in Canada there's a service, an organization, and they're massive where they have trained people online, and you're texting with children, youth, and so they're texting and you're actually speaking to them with on their text messaging, and you come across almost all the time people are on the edge, they're cutting themselves,
Mhm,
or they're lost.
mhm,
And this whole piece you're talking about, I stumbled into that and I thought, oh my God, it's so prevalent in society. And where I live in the corporate world as an executive, you couldn't say you're not okay. You couldn't speak about your father, your mother. It's just taboo. My situation, going back to it, and how everybody, Dr. Sherrie, changed my life, is going back a few years. I have four people in my family: my mom, my dad, my two brothers. And I now talk about it publicly, and it doesn't matter to me what they might
mhm.
think, because
Good for you.
I'm saying it with love. But I was the black and blue kid. My dad was the get, straight A's, overachieve, but he used physical intimidation, and I
Mhm,
took the brunt of it when he drank mostly.
mhm.
Uh, my mother was so sick and all, but there were these, what you call, emotional barbs all the time.
Yes.
And my mom's actually, it was later in life I started struggling with my relationship with her, because my mother was, uh, she she emulated some of my dad's behavior, and there was fat shaming and names,
Mm,
some very serious things that today I still look in the mirror and I struggle with the way I might look. This is my
mhm,
mother, but I love both my parents, and I didn't really know the difference at the time. And then I have a younger brother who has Tourette's syndrome, and
mm,
he struggled. It was triggered, I think, in from the toxicity in the home. But later in life, he became very, very toxic toward me personally, and that started coming into my life through messages, telephone. Wind the clock forward, and sorry, my older brother, who I'm still not too close to, sadly, he emulated my dad's behavior as well. So he would hit me, and a lot of name calling, and I think he has a lot of regret over that.
mhm,
But I would go into corporate America, sit in meetings and boardrooms, and I'd be looking at, say, you in a meeting, and the way you might raise your voice or talk, and all of a sudden you appeared to be my dad, or you appeared to be. So I only learned through you teaching that. I didn't know what the word trauma meant, but
mhm,
those things that happen early in my life, I can be sitting in a room and I relive that experience unconsciously.
mhm,
So I'll get to the end and I'll just finish this, because I really wanted to get the honor you for what you did for me with your work.
mhm,
Now, my father, God's, it was just something that through prayer, I said, I got to go get back in touch with my dad, because he was bugging me to get back. I met him at a Starbucks in the October of 2017. And I said, Dad, let's, it was hard. He said, I love you, son. He said, I'm sorry for the things I did. And he was 23 years in AA at that moment.
mm.
And he was a frail old man. And we ended up a big smile. I took a selfie picture and I said, Dad, why don't we meet back here in January? It's going to be hard, but every month have coffee and just go slow. I said, you can reconnect to my daughter, your granddaughter. My dad, big smile. And he died in January
Oh,
from a heart attack. I never had that next coffee. But when I talk about it today, I can honestly say I love my dad, because by cutting ties with him for a period of time, it made me heal. But also by hearing his story and hearing what his experience was, it gave me more perspective. But the
Mhm.
part about the story that is the hardest is my younger brother. When my dad died, we buried him, and that's when my younger brother turned into a monster. And you name it, death threats, constant messages. I had to shut my phone system off. And what happened, Sherrie, is I started becoming paralyzed. I just was an
Mhm.
emotional wreck in my gut. I was even afraid when the phone rang of picking it up. And then
Mhm.
it started creeping through to my wife's cell phone. That was at the moment where I reached out to you and everybody. I said to Dr. Sherrie, I said, I need you to coach me because I trust you.
Mhm.
What
Mhm.
should I do? And that's where you introduce the concept of cutting ties. I actually did not know I had this ability, but I actually cut off all communication with him. You told me back then, you said, it's going to be hard because he might try to get through to your other
Oh,
family members.
sure. Oh, yeah.
Not only did I cut off ties with him, but I severed ties with my mom for a period of time. But
Mhm.
I made sure that I prayed and I said in my prayers, I love my parents. I'm doing this for myself to heal. What I didn't know was each time my brother's behavior would come into my life, it would push me back deeply into that past life. And in order to
Mhm.
heal and get healthier, I couldn't be there. So here we are 2, 3 years later, and my life is totally incredible. I'm still
Mhm.
dealing with my concussion, but I'm at peace. I'm happy. It's saved me from myself. Now, I dominated with that story, but I want you to take it back from there. Talk about the book and the tools in it, and anything you want to say about the journey you heard me tell you.
Yeah, so what you talked about was actually complex post-traumatic stress disorder. It's CPTSD. That's why you would
Yeah,
have those triggers from an authoritarian boss or
yeah,
wherever. And my book goes over CPTSD at great length, and it also gives you a lot of strategies. This book is full of strategies on how to deal with smear campaigning, CPTSD, misdiagnosed ADHD, all the things that we come out with health issues. We come out with just because we're sick with fear and anxiety coming from a family like mine or yours. So, when you get out of a toxic family, it's really not any different than leaving a cult. So, and that's not even to be dramatic. That's just how it is. If you watch
yeah,
Scientology in the aftermath, I didn't go through anything different than they did. It's just that there was, less people and barely less money. But, I was removed from trusts. I was not told that my dad died. I had to find out on Google. There were several people who reached out to me that they were threatened and instructed not to tell me
wow,
by both my sibling and my mother. So, it all comes out. The truth just always comes out. But I also look at no contact as being very respectful of your toxic family members' choices to be toxic.
mm,
So yes, those boundaries are set to protect you, but you're also honoring their choice to be the way they are. And
right,
that's how they want to be. People know right from wrong, and they absolutely know when they're toxic. And so, but they don't care. And you can't make them care. Wanting them to care isn't going to make them care. Wishing them to care isn't going to make them care. Cutting ties, it's so misunderstood because people see it as you're doing it to hurt them or to make a point. Well, that's what toxic people do. If you cut ties with them, they'll cut ties with you back even harder.
yeah,
It's a competition for them. I don't even think about them in that way. I just know that I'm not safe there. I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to hurt me. And this is how they choose to be. They have all the evidence and all the conversation from me and others that they maybe should make some changes. So my no contact boundaries not only honor my heart, but it honors their choice. This is
yes,
how these people want to be.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's a hard truth, but this is the truth. So
Yeah, thank you for that. I just went on a journey in my head again. I do some training workshops for my corporate training business, and there's a doctor that psychology that I teach a part of his course, and I remember he saying to me one time that the word pathological in personality science, and that's really what this was for me as a family member who I would say is pathological, and
oh
it's
sure.
brilliant what you said, but it's their choice not to go get help, not to sort things out. My
Mhm.
father's son, I could have become like my dad, but I made the choices, and I was hurt too. I want to talk about just the book, and you said there's many strategies, a couple ones that popped up. Let's talk a bit more about what's the strategy, like how do you cut ties? What actually are the steps, and how do you deal with the guilt and the aftermath of that? And then the second one was misdiagnosed ADHD. I have an interest for someone I know.
Well, I've misdiagnosed ADHD, and I actually take medication for it.
Yeah.
So I think to start there is I could not focus. That's for sure. Organizing things was a little hard. But I was so full of fear and anxiety, and these two powerful fuels made me feel hyper, and it made me feel like I had a Ferrari sitting in a parking lot, not driving, but just the gas is being pushed. Um, so I couldn't go to school and function. I didn't need school to help me with life and to learn things about life. I needed school to help me to go home. And school doesn't help you go home.
Yeah.
So I just was full of worry, and I have anxiety feelings every single day. It's just how my brain's programmed, because my life was changing with every marriage and changing with every mood. And, my dad was emotionally violent and physically violent. My mom is as savage as you get when it comes to being just cruel
Yeah.
to someone
Yeah.
emotionally. So I had all
So,
those things.
so Dr. Sherrie, the word misdiagnosed, or is that suggesting that you had ADHD, but it wasn't diagnosed? Or is that what you were, what
I
that?
don't think I have ADHD, although I take medication for
Oh, I
ADHD. I
see. I
think the
see.
reasons I was unable to focus was due to fear, being unsafe, and
Okay.
anxiety, and being young. And then it causes me, sometimes I can over emote and under reason
Yeah,
if I feel pressure or whatnot. So I've had to work on that part.
I see.
But, boundaries are, you'd ask that question. So boundaries, setting those. Um, all I'll say to make it very simple for the reader is words don't work with toxic people. Everything you say can and will be held against you. So I think you should allow your actions to speak louder than your words, and use silence. When someone is abusing you, they know it, and you don't owe them an explanation for why you're distancing yourself.
Yeah,
Um, they will get so mad when you distance yourself that they'll cut you off. They just do you the favor, but then they don't let go. They come back and abuse and call and
yeah,
smear
yeah,
campaign, involve third parties. And I go through all of that in this new book. Every third party, how to have relationships with people that are still connected to your toxic family. Can you? What are those strategies? What about holidays, social media? I have it all covered in this book because no one knows how to do it.
Well, I'm just going to steal your thunder again and put the review of the book up. There it is. Just to get the title up, Adult Survivors of Toxic Family Members, Tools to Maintain Boundaries, Deal with Criticisms, Heal from the After Ties, after that are being cut. The one that's just so brilliant, the thing you said about be silent, and they said there's a word I'm trying to think of. I think the word mentor. A mentor is somebody who's walked the path that you're trying to walk, and they've been there. So everybody, Dr. Sherrie's a mentor. She's a maven. She's an expert because she's been there and done this. When I did this with my brother and my family back after the death of my father, and by the way, it was 6 months after I did this, Sherrie.
Yeah.
I was feeling like, oh, the
Woohoo!
world is
Yeah.
awesome. And then I did the ride to conquer cancer and fell on my head and got
Oh
a brain
gosh.
injury. And
Oh
it's like,
God, Tom.
okay, now that's okay. I've probably cut ties with myself now because I can't even think. Uh,
Oh,
but I remember, because remember the emails I sent you. I remember
yeah.
saying,
Oh, of
do I
course.
write a letter? What do I do? And you said no, you don't.
Mm-mm.
And I was feeling horrible because I thought, well, how rude is that, or what are they going to do? And I was afraid. But
Yeah.
I did exactly what Dr. Sherrie said. I went in the cone of silence. I canceled my voicemail. Even some of my clients and friends were wondering what the hell's going on with Tom. And the hardest part for me, and I'm going to say this with love in my heart for my wife, she's 26 years married to me. She is a rock. You and her are many, many similarities. Um, Beauty inside and out, she is.
Mhm.
But she grew up in a traditional Italian family, and the
Mhm.
nucleus, the parents are everything. And even when I observed, because she tells her story now about loving her parents, but she was controlled, wasn't allowed
Mhm.
to be a girl. She wasn't allowed to play sports. And sometimes things I would look at it and go, you know, you deserve better than that. But family's everything. That was the belief system she brought into my life. And so the hardest thing I had to deal with initially was how to have her accept what I was doing, because she would go and visit my mom all the time, and I stopped. And we went through some hard times over it, where I finally almost drew the line, and I had to say, look, I have to do this. If you don't understand why, it's because you haven't come from a place I have. I said to her, I love my mom, I love my family, but from afar, I'll love them. I can't. Tell us how people, give us an example of where you might have seen that, and how people can deal with that if it's that close to them as their partner.
Well, toxic people actually really like to go after the people that are closest to you to try and rob you of your support system. So my mother reached out to my ex-husband and wanted to
Oh,
develop a relationship with him behind my back to see my kid without my permission. So
crazy.
I mean, the level of sadistic stuff there is intense, and it can be hard for people outside of you to understand why you're doing what you're doing. But the way that I look at it is, if you've cut ties with your mother and your closest supports understand and have seen your pain, they need to follow suit so they're
Yeah,
not used, because then you're
yeah,
going to be betrayed everywhere you turn around.
exactly. So we got through that. And Anna's the biggest supporter of my life, and I
Hmm.
have to say that it's a gift. But this is something I say to people who have followed the Dr. Sherrie strategy. It's going to be hard if you
Hmm.
have some in your life. And my encouragement to her was to read your book and let her know I got this strategy from somebody who's an expert in this area. But even to today, Dr. Sherrie, with all the, I see a psychiatrist for my mental health, for my concussion, even to today, and they put me in 9 months of cognitive behavioral therapy just to help with my anxiety about my injury. I've never come across, like you said, it's not out there anywhere,
Mm-mm.
this concept. And
Hmm.
even when I told some of the people in the room who were with me who had bipolar and who had depression, some young people, older people who were struggling, they had toxic people in their life. One girl kept talking in the sessions, and this was like 9 months, 2 hours a month of group therapy. And this one girl kept breaking down. She was young, broke my heart, reminded me of my daughter. And she kept
Hmm.
talking about her toxic boyfriend. And part of
Hmm.
me wanted just to shake her and say, what are you pretending not to know? And there was a psychiatrist teaching the course with a medical doctor. None of them had any suggestions. So
Hmm.
so that's amazing. Uh, Tell us about another strategy in the book there. I just want to get a couple more out before we move to wrapping up.
Well, I start the book helping the reader to understand where their feelings of shame and anxiety come from. And I use Eric Erickson's psychological theory of psychosocial development. And I go through each stage: trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame and doubt. And there's exercises in the book all throughout to help you understand how you became the way you became. Because if we can learn, we can unlearn. And so there's strategies all throughout your development. So toxic shame is a big thing you got to get rid of, because when you cut ties, society now is going to shame you, and you don't want to fall into CPTSD, which you will, but you need to find your way out. I talk about remothering, refathering
Yeah.
yourself. I give you strategies for that. There's affirmation strategies. There's writing exercises suggested. I go through lists, like if a toxic parent will label you as bossy, where a healthy parent would label you as a great leader.
Yes.
So I work a lot with addition rather than subtraction. There's a lot of parenting tips in there. So there isn't any part of my book that does not have a strategy. So it's hard for me to pick just one out, but there's strategies for toxic shame. There's strategy to deal with wills and trust. There's strategies to deal with flying monkeys, which are the people who come in and help to
I was just
poison
visualizing a
you.
monkey flying by. So
How to
what?
deal with the smear campaign. There's all kinds of strategies for that. And then, there's a path up the mountain. And as
Yeah.
another survivor, if I've been able to do it, and I live a very happy, very peaceful life, and I don't feel guilt, because I don't feel like I owe anyone who abuses me anything.
Yeah.
And I'm also not angry. I don't live a life of anger. I don't wish harm on any of my family members. I just try to handle everything with everyone's highest good involved, and silence and staying quiet seems to be the best way to do that. If I have nothing nice to say to someone who's savagely abused me my entire life, then I think it's best that that
Yeah.
person meet their maker in their own way. I'm not the maker.
Absolutely.
I'm not the maker, so they can meet their maker.
I'm going to ask you a question, and then I'll explain why I'm asking it. If you can answer it, it might seem odd, but what's your nationality? You were born in the United States. What's your nationality or your
Yeah,
heritage?
born in the United States. I'm half Scottish and sort of half just European anywhere
Okay.
else.
So that was what the next question was. I live in Canada where we have a rainbow of people,
Hmm.
and so there's a large. I'm South Asian, born in England actually, but live here with parents from Fiji and grandparents from India. My first wife was born here, but to traditional Hong Kong based parent or Hong Kong born parents. And sadly, in the South Asian culture, particularly in the Indian culture, it's prevalent. And I saw my dad when he's drinking physically hurt my mom. I saw my uncles do it. They don't treat their partners well.
Mm.
And yet there's this in even today in the community, there's this big fear, particularly of the women, of talking about it because it's the status of what will people think. The first woman I was married to, I might have told you this, when we got married, she let me know that the first time she told anybody, she was molested by her father for 6 years, and that if I ever left her, she said she'd commit suicide. And yet I saw the same thing there. It was about the status of the family.
Hmm.
So what do you say to people who are growing up now, who might read your book and see this, who but they're dealing with a cultural thing that's so strong? It's
Hmm.
just another layer of how hard this is.
Hmm.
What do you say to that?
Well, I have a lot of that in my whole. I mean, I have a very large, huge social media following. So I have every culture,
Yeah.
everything going on. So I'm just going to say very simply, there's no excuse for abuse. So
Yes.
you can say, oh, my mom was abused or my dad was
Yeah.
abused, and that's why they did it. Could be cultural, could be generational. Sure, I'm sure those things affect the people that abuse you.
Yeah.
I just don't think that's an excuse. Now, is it harder to cut ties maybe in an Indian culture? Yes. I had a patient who was Indian, and that was very difficult because her father was a total abuser of women. And I don't want to stereotype that because there's other Indian men that are very lovely to their people.
Yes.
However, what we did was we just used distance. No
Yeah.
contact doesn't need to necessarily be a label. She had to learn a cordial way to sort of interface with him. We used body language, physical distance, emotional distance, and she was able to stay connected to the family, but she was able to disconnect from her dad in the healthiest way for her possible,
Yeah.
because there could be too much of a threat to do it the other way.
For
I
sure.
lost everything when I chose not to mend the fence after my mother cut me off. I just didn't mend the fence. And so that's where we are 6 years
Yeah.
later, because her ego is just so big that she
Yeah.
can't find her way back. So sure,
Thank
we can make any excuse for abuse, but there just is none.
I love that line, everybody. And we're talking to Dr. Sherrie. She's been on the show before. You want to get that episode in the archives and listen to it. She tells her story where she came from as a child and it
Mhm.
shaped herself to do what she does. The book is Adult Survivors of Toxic Family Members. I encourage call to action everybody to get that book, but authors are known by when you read their books and post a review. So I want you to post a review on Amazon or goodreads.com. The book will be out in audio version. That's how we honor this story. But that book, everybody, pass it around because that book's going to save lives. I want to ask you another question about the I went through this personally, but after cutting ties, there's a whole other piece of it that has to happen, in my opinion. That was great. I managed to get this cocoon around me of silence and peace finally, but I still had to go through therapy and it was a bit of neuroplasticity, it was a bit of exercises, a bit of medication to unravel those thought patterns because that doesn't go away. Every
Mm-mm.
day. It's so. Did you touch on anything in the book, like after you've cut ties, what do you do to take
100%.
care? Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's
Okay.
exercises all throughout because your most, critical parents become your inner critics. So I
Yeah.
reframe self-talk. I give a lot of exercises on how to do that. It is consistent.
Good.
This isn't an event, it's a process.
Yeah.
And I also differentiate for the reader the difference between healing and being healed. There is no such thing as healed. You're always going to be healing because the way the brain is developed with the amygdala and the hippocampal areas, unless you get a lobotomy of those two areas, you are always going to be triggered. You have
Yes.
triggers, right?
Yes.
So there are many, many ways to work with those triggers, and they are detailed in my book. Tons.
That's awesome. And so the other thought that just came into my mind is about outside the home. I see this all the time because of my executive coaching, but it's toxic leaders. So
Oh,
this is
yeah.
this is the other one I think about is, you know, if you have that wiring and you're triggered, there's almost everybody has a story of a toxic boss or somebody who behaves a certain way, that it gets in the way of how they perform at work. Any quick thoughts on that?
Well, my quick thought on that is that, you have to leave your job if you need to leave your job, and you got to take your time to do that. But your boss isn't going to change. So that means your
Mhm.
environment won't change.
Yeah.
However, what I will say, what people need to know is the most toxic person in any dynamic or environment is also the least confronted.
Oh, okay.
So they should be the most confronted, but no one wants to poke the bear.
Of course.
Because it's not worth it. It's not worth
Yeah.
the sacrifice of your peace, for say. So if that's your situation, the only thing that's going to change that situation isn't HR, because HR, believe it or not, isn't going to want to poke the bear either. You have to change that situation. And that ends up feeling in our ego really unfair. Well, this is the toxic boss. Why should I have to lose my job, or however it's going to work? But if the only place that you can change is yourself, then you have to consider what you want to do for your health.
Thank you for sharing that. And to all my listeners and Dr. Sherrie's listeners, I'm going to tell you personally that I've been through that, been through a downsizing. And I remember it wasn't because of a toxic boss, but it was when I was a top executive, and it was a pretty big job. The company just merged 3 ways. And I remember my lawyer talking about my settlement said that, this is going to, you're going to thank me, but this is freeing up your future.
Yes.
And so every door that you close opens a new door into
Yes.
The other side of it through coaching. Now, when I coach people, I'll say things like, what are you pretending not to know? You just keep saying you hate your boss. You don't like this. You don't like that. Why are you still there? And I also believe that there's something that our brain does where that's the normal. If
we are very prone to stick to an attachment that's familiar.
That's right.
Even when it's abusive, than to venture out into the unknown. But you cannot build your self-worth or your confidence in yourself if you don't do the brave thing. I'll leave with this. I've always done the brave thing, not because I've wanted to, but almost because I felt like I was either going to die or not, emotionally. So, but I've never done the brave thing bravely.
Yeah.
Feeling brave always comes after doing the brave thing and succeeding at it. So
that's a teaching moment, everybody. Come back and just listen to that part of the show. So as we wrap up, Dr. Sherrie, I'm going to just grab my notepad here. People who don't listen but don't see the show, I write these down as you're speaking. These are leadership words. I want to honor you with 4 words. Okay. First one is maven. In the book Outliers, a maven is somebody who, when you think, who can I go to for expertise on this? This is the lady. Trailblazer, because what you're doing is absolutely trailblazing. I believe what you said. You're the only one who has this expertise, because I have never found it, and I've been seeking for most of my life. 3 is love. It comes out of you. And I think just by doing what you're doing spreads love around the world. And 4 is decisive. Man, I'll tell you, I needed to have someone like you kicking my butt saying, Tom, you got to do this. But everybody, if you're stuck, read this book, because it's not just a self-help book that says, try this. It's like you do it this way, and you do it this way, and you do this, and you do this.
Well, think about this. Abusers count on creating confusion, because confusion kills resiliency. Clarity is always kind. To be clear is to be kind. So thank you for those sweet words and your thoughts, Tom, and for having me on your show. It's been really special.
You're welcome. And so I'll just flash the book up one more time, everybody. Dr. Sherrie, how can people get a hold of you and the book or anything else you have?
My website, I did an incredible interview with Jack Canfield on my previous book. And if you sign up on my email list at drsherriecampbell.com, you'll get to see that interview for free. And Jack Canfield is as big as they get when it comes to self-help or being a successful writer, author, speaker, leader. He's, lives next door to Oprah, for crying out loud. So we love Jack, and he's as sweet as you can imagine that he is. So you can find everything there. My social media links are all there. And if you want daily coaching, get onto my Facebook page, Sherrie Campbell PhD. I have an Instagram, Dr.Sherrie, and I have an incredible podcast. It's ranked worldwide. It's on Apple. It is exclusive to Apple because it's a subscription podcast, but that is called Therapy Sessions, Cutting Toxic Family Ties.
Yeah, I've seen it pop up, and definitely I'm on it. Everybody, there you have it. So find that true passion and purpose like you hear from Dr. Sherrie, and live the life that you deserve and desire, and get this book and give it a rating and connect with Dr. Sherrie if you need her. Thank you, Dr. Sherrie, for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Tom. Good to see you.
We'll be talking to you again.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca